The entire SEAL squad was surrounded, backs against an abandoned prison camp. A desperate voice crackled over the radio. "We're done for! They've got a helicopter!" Rotor blades thundered overhead, kicking up clouds of dust. Suddenly, a cold female voice cut through the static. "No! That helicopter is mine now!" Everyone looked up as rockets rained down, obliterating the enemy. The pilot was the prisoner they'd all dismissed. Her name was Reina Vasquez, 28 years old. Long brown hair tangled and dirty, sun-weathered skin, brown eyes that burned with inner fire despite the dust and grime of captivity. Captured during an ambush months earlier, the enemy had dismissed her as just another harmless female prisoner. They'd thrown her into a makeshift detention camp near the border. On her first day inside, the male prisoners mocked her. "Little girl only survived because of dumb luck. Look how weak she is. That's supposed to be a soldier." She quietly arranged her sleeping area without responding, only taking an old piece of parachute cord and braiding it into a small bracelet around her wrist. The captured SEALs initially doubted her too. To them, she looked more like a civilian who'd wandered into a war zone than a warrior. When guards brought their daily rations, she silently gave her portion to the most severely wounded soldier. One cold night, she removed her only thin jacket and covered a soldier who was burning with fever. He whispered, "Why are you helping me? I don't even trust who you are." Reina simply replied, "Wounded people need to live. It doesn't matter what they think." The other prisoners watched her small acts of kindness with suspicion. In their world, generosity was weakness. Caring was vulnerability. But Reina never asked for anything in return. She just quietly shared what little she had. When interrogators came, she remained silent. When guards tried to intimidate her, she showed no fear. When fellow prisoners challenged her, she simply looked away. The SEALs began to notice something different about her. The way she moved, the way she observed, the way she seemed to catalog every detail of the camp's security. "She watches everything," one SEAL whispered to another, "like she's planning something." Planning what? She's just a prisoner like us. But there were moments when her civilian mask slipped. When helicopters flew overhead, her eyes tracked them with professional interest. When guards handled weapons carelessly, she noticed every mistake they made. One night, a young SEAL with a broken arm was shivering uncontrollably. Reina sat beside him, sharing her body heat to keep him warm. "I still don't know who you are," he admitted. "I'm someone who doesn't leave people behind," she replied. A captured SEAL would later recall, "That night when I was burning up with fever, she gave me her only jacket. I still thought she was just a weak prisoner. I was completely wrong." Word spread through the camp. There would be a prisoner exchange, but Reina's name wasn't on the list. An enemy officer looked at her with contempt. "You're not worth trading. Nobody wants you." That night, in the corner of their cell, several SEALs whispered, "She's probably not even military, just dead weight." Reina remained silent, sitting apart from the others, staring through the barred window at the dark sky. But small details began revealing themselves. When a careless guard dropped his AK-47, Reina's eyes instantly tracked the weapon's loading mechanism and magazine release. Her observation was automatic, instinctive, professional. One SEAL noticed, "That movement, that's not how civilians look at weapons." Another morning, the thunder of rotor blades announced the arrival of an enemy attack helicopter. The aircraft landed near the camp, preparing for an upcoming assault. Prisoners in the yard whispered in fear, "We're dead? They've got air support now?" Reyna studied the aircraft and murmured quietly, "That's a Mi-24 Hind. Its rocket system has been modified. Gun traverse is limited. If you know the blind spots, there's still a chance." A SEAL stared at her. "How do you know that?" Reyna fell silent, turning away, but her knowledge was too specific to ignore. She wasn't guessing. She was speaking from experience. "The rotor wash pattern indicates engine modifications," she continued, almost to herself. "Twin Isotov TV-3117 turboshafts, probably upgraded for desert operations. Fuel consumption would be higher, but power-to-weight ratio improved." The SEALs exchanged glances. This wasn't textbook knowledge. This was pilot-level expertise. When guards brought their afternoon meal, Reyna moved differently. Her posture had changed. She was no longer the defeated prisoner they'd grown accustomed to seeing. "Ma'am," a young SEAL asked carefully, "what did you do before you were captured?" Reyna's answer was barely audible. "I flew." "Flew what?" She looked directly at him for the first time. "Things that weren't supposed to exist." That evening, as enemy forces prepared for their next operation, Reyna sat by the window studying the helicopter's position. Her fingers moved unconsciously, as if operating invisible controls. Another prisoner watched her. "You're memorizing the startup sequence, aren't you?" Reyna didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. A veteran SEAL who'd been watching her for weeks finally spoke up. "I've seen that look before. In pilots' ready rooms, you're not planning an escape. You're planning a mission." "I'm planning to survive," Reyna replied. "What's your real name?" he pressed. She hesitated for a long moment. "Officially? I don't have one anymore." "Unofficially. Reyna Vasquez, call sign Phantom." The name meant nothing to most of them, but the oldest SEAL in their group went pale. "Phantom? From Kraken Unit?" Reyna's silence was answer enough. Kraken Unit. The classified special operations program that officially didn't exist. Elite pilots who flew missions that never appeared in any records. Everything began making sense. Her knowledge of aircraft systems, her tactical awareness, her calm under pressure. The youngest SEAL in their group would later recall, "That day I called her dead weight. But when I heard her describe the Mi-24's engine specifications, I realized she'd been sitting in that cockpit before, and we had completely misjudged her." The pieces were falling into place. Reyna Vasquez wasn't just another prisoner. She was a weapon waiting for the right moment to activate. The assault began at dawn. Enemy forces closed in from 3 directions, with the Mi-24 warming up for the final strike. Radio chatter filled the air. "We're done for. They've got a helicopter." In the chaos of the attack, Reyna made her move. While guards focused on the advancing enemy, she slipped from the prisoner compound. Her movements were fluid, purposeful, professional. Years of training took over. She moved like smoke through the compound, avoiding patrols, using cover like someone who'd spent a lifetime in hostile territory. The Mi-24 sat on its landing pad, rotors beginning to spin. The pilot was running through his pre-flight checklist, preparing to unleash destruction on the trapped SEALs. He never saw Reyna coming. One moment he was checking instruments. The next, he was unconscious on the ground, and a woman was sliding into his seat. Reyna's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. Engine startup sequence, weapon systems activation, navigation displays, everything came back to her like muscle memory. Her voice cut through the radio static. "No, that helicopter is mine now." The SEALs looked up in shock as the Mi-24 lifted off, but instead of attacking them, it banked sharply toward the enemy forces. Reyna's first rocket salvo obliterated an enemy machine gun nest. Her second destroyed their command post. Her third scattered the assault team like leaves in a hurricane. From the ground, a SEAL commander shouted into his radio, "Who the hell is flying that thing?" "It's Phantom," another SEAL replied, watching the precision strikes with professional admiration. "It's actually her." The Mi-24 moved like a dancer in the sky. Reyna used every trick she'd learned in years of classified operations. Low-altitude attacks, terrain masking, precision targeting that minimized collateral damage while maximizing enemy casualties. But this wasn't just about superior flying skills. This was personal. Months of captivity, of being dismissed and underestimated, of watching fellow prisoners suffer. All of that anger found expression in the controlled violence of aerial combat. "Take out the sniper positions on the ridge," the SEAL commander radioed. Reyna's response was immediate. The helicopter's chin gun rotated with mechanical precision, eliminating enemy marksmen with surgical accuracy. When the smoke cleared, the enemy force had been completely neutralized. Reyna set the Mi-24 down near the prison compound with the gentle touch of someone who'd made thousands of landings. As the rotors spooled down, she climbed out of the cockpit and walked calmly toward the stunned SEALs. "Extraction is inbound," she said simply. "You're going home." The same men who'd dismissed her as dead weight now stared at her with something approaching awe. "Ma'am," the SEAL commander said, "we owe you our lives." Reyna shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. We're all just trying to survive." But it was more than survival. It was vindication. The story came out in fragments over the following hours. Reyna had been a top-tier pilot in Kraken Unit's aviation division. She'd flown missions so classified that her service record had been completely erased. She'd been captured while trying to extract a downed aircrew behind enemy lines. Her helicopter had been shot down, her crew killed, and she'd been taken prisoner while providing cover for the wounded. For months, the enemy had held a legendary combat pilot without realizing it. They'd dismissed her as insignificant, just another captured soldier. Their mistake had cost them everything. "Why didn't you tell us who you were?" a young SEAL asked. Reyna looked at the burning wreckage of enemy vehicles scattered across the landscape. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. We were all prisoners. We were all forgotten." But they weren't forgotten anymore. The rescue helicopters arrived an hour later, finding the entire SEAL team alive, and the enemy force completely destroyed. As they loaded into the extraction birds, one SEAL asked Reyna, "What happens now?" She looked back at the abandoned prison camp, then at the Mi-24 she'd commandeered. "Now we go home. And we remember that sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person who saves your life." After the rescue, when reports were filed, many wanted to credit the SEAL commander for the successful operation. But he refused. "No. If it wasn't for her, we'd all be dead. That prisoner is the pilot who saved the entire team." When offered military decorations for her actions, Reyna declined. She only asked to return to the base medical facility to help care for wounded soldiers. She walked through the corridors past rows of SEALs. For the first time, there was no mocking laughter, only respectful nods and quiet acknowledgement. A young recruit would later recall, "She walked past us in silence, didn't need any titles or recognition. But from that day on, we called her teammate." The story spread throughout the base. Nobody dared underestimate a prisoner anymore. Because sometimes, behind a fragile appearance, lay strength that an entire squad had to depend on. Word of Reyna's actions reached higher command. Offers came in for reinstatement, promotion, special assignments. She turned them all down. "I'm not that person anymore," she told her commanding officer. "I'm just someone who helps people get home." But the SEALs she'd saved never forgot. They made sure her story was told accurately, completely, honestly. In the base hospital where she now worked, Raina treated wounded soldiers with the same quiet competence she'd shown in the cockpit. No fanfare, no ego, just professional care for people who needed healing. One evening, a wounded pilot was brought in. Helicopter crash, multiple fractures, fighting for his life. As Raina worked to stabilize him, he grabbed her wrist weakly. I heard your Phantom, the legend." Raina continued her medical work without looking up. "I'm just a medic. Let's focus on keeping you alive." But after he was stable and sleeping, she sat by his bedside through the night, because she understood what it meant to fall from the sky and need someone to catch you. The base had learned an important lesson. Never judge people by their current circumstances. The prisoner might be a pilot. The medic might be a warrior. The quiet person in the corner might be exactly who you need when everything goes wrong. Raina had chosen a new path, but her old skills remained sharp, just in case her people needed Phantom to fly again. Because some responsibilities never end, some bonds never break, and some guardian angels wear flight suits under their medical scrubs. Type, "I will live kindly," if you believe that everyone deserves to be seen with respect, not prejudice. Raina's story isn't just about battlefields, it's a reminder. Never judge anyone by their appearance. The person you dismiss today might be the one who pulls you from death tomorrow. In daily life, it's the same. There are quiet people, not flashy or attention-seeking, but when the moment comes, they become the foundation everyone else depends on. Raina chose silence, chose to avoid fame and glory. But that silence left the loudest echo of all. Around us are people with hidden talents, buried expertise, concealed strength. The accountant who used to be a paramedic, the teacher who was once a soldier, the clerk who flew helicopters in another life. We reinvent ourselves constantly, sometimes to escape our past, sometimes to find a better future. But our experiences never truly disappear. Our skills remain. Our hearts remember how to serve others, even when we're trying to forget who we used to be. The lesson is simple. Treat everyone with respect. You never know when you might need them to save your life. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to SN Quiet Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.